What if your job, something you thought was harmless, dragged you into a nightmare? Meet a professional frogger, someone paid to remove frogs from properties. Sounds simple, right? But when he gets called to a mysterious family home, everything changes. The frogs aren't the only thing lurking in the shadows. A family with strange eyes, a secret buried beneath the floor, and a house that seems to breathe. It's not just the frogs he's removing, it's something far darker. What happens when the job pulls him into a world he can never leave? You won't believe what happens next. Trust me, you've never seen a family act this way. Stay tuned, watch till the end to uncover the shocking truth. Hit that subscribe button, and get ready for a spine-chilling journey you'll never forget. I've spent years as a professional frogger. You might not have heard of it, but it's exactly what it sounds like. I catch frogs. For a living. Sounds easy, right? It's not. I've been all over the country, crawling through swamps, dodging snakes, and avoiding the strange, eerie sounds that fill the night air. But nothing prepared me for what I found in that house. It started with a simple call. A family in rural Kansas had an unusual frog problem. Not the usual, frogs in the yard, kind of problem. They were inside the house. Everywhere. I arrived at the address late in the evening. The sun had just set, and the air felt thick, almost suffocating. The house sat alone on a hill, surrounded by thick trees, with only a single light shining through a cracked window. A bad sign, I thought. The door creaked as I entered. The house smelled old, like wet wood and damp earth. But there was something more to it. Something off. A woman greeted me at the door. Her smile was wide, almost too wide. She said her name was Evelyn. Her voice was soft, almost like she was trying to keep it low, as if someone might be listening. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. Her eyes darted around nervously. I followed her into the house. The living room was dark, but I could make out a few shadows moving in the corners. Something about the way they shifted made my skin crawl. I asked her about the frogs. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she motioned for me to follow her down the hallway. The deeper I went into the house, the colder it became. I began to hear the sound of tiny, wet feet tapping on the hardwood floors. I froze. That wasn't right. Evelyn stopped in front of a door at the end of the hall. She opened it slowly. A faint, foul smell hit me like a wave. It smelled like rotten flesh. Inside, there were frogs. Hundreds of them. Every surface was covered. The walls. The furniture. The floor. But there was something strange about them. They weren't acting like regular frogs. They weren't hopping around. They were still, all facing the center of the room, as if they were waiting for something. I turned to Evelyn. She was standing there, her smile even wider now. Her eyes were unnaturally wide. "You didn't tell me they were like this," I said, my voice shaking. "They're harmless," she replied, her voice almost a chant now. Her words felt wrong. Like she wasn't really speaking them. I felt a chill creep down my spine. There was something in the air, something thick and heavy. It was suffocating. Suddenly, I heard a noise from behind me. A soft scraping sound, like fingernails on glass. I turned around. At first, I thought it was one of the frogs moving. But no. There was a man standing in the doorway. He was tall, unnaturally tall. His face was gaunt, hollow-eyed. He was staring at me with a blank expression, his lips barely moving as he whispered, "Don't look at them." Evelyn didn't react. She just stood there, watching me. The frogs didn't move either. They remained perfectly still, all facing the man in the doorway. The man stepped forward. His eyes locked onto mine. He started to smile, but it wasn't a human smile. It was wide, stretching past what should have been possible. "Do you hear it?" he asked, his voice low and rasping. I tried to look away, but I couldn't. It was as if the room itself was holding me in place. The frogs began to croak. But it wasn't just a normal croak. It was different. The sound was deep, resonating in my chest. It was almost like the frogs were chanting. Chanting something dark. The man's smile grew even wider. "Listen to them," he whispered. "Listen to what they say." I felt my heart race. The room was spinning. The air was thick with dread. I couldn't breathe. The man stepped closer. He was almost upon me now. Suddenly, I realized what I was hearing. The frogs weren't croaking. They were speaking. Their voices were faint, but they were clear now. I could make out the words. "Join us." The world went silent. I turned to Evelyn. Her face was blank, her eyes empty. The frogs were still staring at me, unblinking. The man behind me was still smiling. And then the room seemed to lurch. Everything started to twist. The walls began to stretch and bend. The air felt wrong. I stumbled back, but there was nowhere to go. The frogs were everywhere. They were closing in. I had to get out. I turned and ran. But no matter where I went, I couldn't escape. Every hallway led to the same door. The frogs were waiting for me. The man's voice echoed in my ears. "You're one of us now." And I knew then. There was no way out. I backed into the corner, my heart pounding in my chest. The walls seemed to close in, the shadows growing longer and darker. The man's voice echoed through the house, a twisted lullaby that rattled my bones. "You can't escape. You're already one of us." I tried to steady my breath, but my legs felt weak, like they weren't my own. The frogs, those countless frogs, were still staring at me. Their eyes gleamed with something more than mere instinct. They were waiting. Evelyn's laughter broke the silence. It was high-pitched, shrill, but there was something oddly comforting about it. Like it was a signal, a part of something much bigger. I turned to look at her. Her smile stretched impossibly wide. Her eyes, hollow and empty, locked onto mine. "Join us," she whispered again. Her voice was no longer human. It was something else entirely, something ancient. I tried to move, but my body refused to obey. It felt like my skin was being pulled in all directions, as if the house itself was trying to swallow me whole. Then the man stepped closer. His shadow stretched across the room, twisting in unnatural ways. With each step, I felt the ground beneath me sink, like the house was no longer solid. "You've been chosen," he said, his voice now a growl. His hands reached out, cold and clammy. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. He was right in front of me now. His face was inches from mine, his breath foul and thick with the stench of decay. I could feel the presence of something behind him, something that was watching, waiting. The frog started to croak again, but this time it wasn't a sound. It was a vibration that rattled my very bones. It was a command. I felt my mouth open, my lips moving against my will. "Yes," I whispered, the words slipping out like they weren't my own. "Join us." Suddenly, the man's grip tightened around my wrist. The cold burned through me, like ice crawling under my skin. I felt myself being pulled toward him, pulled toward the darkness that lurked behind him. And then, I saw it. The thing that was waiting. A figure, standing tall, draped in shadow, its face hidden beneath a hood. Its presence was suffocating, like a weight pressing down on my chest. The figure raised a hand. The air around me crackled. "It's time," the man said, his voice now a raspy hiss. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I couldn't move. The room was closing in. I looked at the frogs, their eyes now glowing with an unearthly light. And that's when I realized. They weren't frogs at all. Their bodies started to twist, changing, shifting into something else, something human. But not quite. Their limbs elongated, their faces became distorted masks of horror, and they were all chanting in a language I couldn't understand. The figure in the shadows raised its other hand. A horrible sensation washed over me, like the very fabric of reality was tearing apart. My vision blurred. I felt myself being dragged into the darkness. It felt as if the floor was falling away beneath me. I was no longer in the house. I was somewhere else. A place where time didn't exist. Where light and shadow were twisted into a sickening blur. And I knew then. There was no way out. The frogs were everywhere. They were in me now. And I was part of them. The man's voice echoed in the void, and I could hear Evelyn's laughter in the distance. We've all been waiting for you. I couldn't escape. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It was as if the darkness had wrapped itself around me, smothering every thought, every shred of resistance. The air was thick, like I was underwater. I could hear the faintest croak, echoing from all directions, vibrating through the very core of me. The frogs, no, the creatures, they were everywhere. Their eyes glowed, and their voices filled the space, growing louder, more urgent. Join us, they all chanted in unison. The sound reverberated in my mind. I felt something pulling at my soul, something ancient and hungry. I wanted to scream, to fight, to claw my way out of this nightmare. But my body wouldn't obey. It was as if I was no longer in control. And then I saw it. The shadowed figure that had been waiting. It stepped forward, its face still hidden, but I could feel its presence, its power pressing down on me like a storm. Its voice was deep, low, and almost drowned by the croaking around us. You have come to us. You have always been ours. The words sank into me like poison, crawling through my veins. I could feel the darkness seeping into my thoughts, twisting them, changing them. I tried to resist. I tried to fight back. But the more I struggled, the more it felt like the house was alive, its walls breathing in time with my racing heart. The shadow figure raised a hand again. This time, it was different. The air became cold, unnaturally cold. I could see my breath hanging in the air like smoke. The croaking stopped. Everything went silent. Even the shadows stood still, waiting. The figure's hand stretched toward me, and suddenly, I was weightless. The ground beneath me vanished, and I was falling through darkness. The sound of the frogs' voices became a roar in my ears, drowning out all other noise. And then, there was a moment of absolute stillness. Complete silence. I opened my eyes. I was standing in a vast, empty space, endless, dark, and cold. There were no walls, no floor. Just an infinite void stretching out before me. I looked around. There was nothing. No light. No sound. But then. I felt it. The weight of 1,000 eyes watching me, waiting. I turned quickly, but saw nothing. The frogs were gone. The shadow figure was gone. But I wasn't alone. I could feel something moving in the darkness, just beyond my vision. Something huge. I took a step forward, but the moment I did, the ground beneath me began to shift, like it was alive. I stumbled back, and then. The ground cracked. A massive, gaping hole appeared in front of me. I stared down into it, and my stomach dropped. The darkness seemed to have no end, a pit of endless black that threatened to swallow me whole. But then I heard it. The sound of croaking, faint at first, but growing louder. It was coming from the pit. coming from deep within. "Join us," the voice whispered again. I knew, with sudden clarity, what was happening. This place, it was their realm. A place between worlds, a place where the frogs, or whatever they were, ruled. And now, I was part of it. I had crossed the line. There was no going back. The croaking grew louder, more frantic. The voices of the creatures, they were calling to me. They were calling me to join them in their dark domain. I turned to run, but the ground beneath me trembled. Something massive was moving, rising from the depths of the pit. I couldn't escape. I couldn't even move. Then, with a sudden jolt, I was pulled forward. My body lurched, as if the darkness itself was dragging me into the abyss. I felt the cold, wet sensation of fingers, no, claws, gripping my arms, pulling me closer to the edge. I looked down one last time. The pit was full of glowing eyes. And I knew, with a certainty I couldn't deny, that I was about to join them. There was no light. There was no escape. Just the sound of croaking. And then the darkness pulled me closer, its grip unrelenting. My body was no longer my own, dragged by unseen forces toward the glowing pit below. The croaking was deafening now, overwhelming my senses. It felt like the very air was alive, pressing against me, suffocating me. I tried to scream, but my voice was lost in the noise. The croaks were like a symphony, each note more insistent than the last, filling my head with thoughts that weren't mine. Thoughts that felt ancient, hungry. I could see the glowing eyes now, hundreds, thousands, swirling around the pit. They weren't just frogs anymore. They were something much worse. Twisted, distorted, their bodies shifting in ways that didn't make sense, like they were no longer bound by the laws of nature. Suddenly, I felt the ground shift beneath me, and I was falling. Falling faster than I could comprehend. The cold air rushed past me, but I didn't hit the ground. Instead, I was suspended, hanging in midair, weightless, as if I had entered another realm entirely. And then, from the depths of the pit, a voice, their voice, rose up, echoing in my mind. "Welcome." It was low, familiar, and yet completely alien. It was the voice of the shadow figure, the man who had led me here. I tried to move, to fight, but I was trapped in this endless void. And then I felt it. A pull in my chest, as if something inside me was being drawn toward the pit. The croaking grew louder, now vibrating through my very bones. It wasn't just a sound anymore, it was a presence. I could feel the creatures, the voices, reaching into me, trying to consume me. "You will become one of us," the voice whispered again, this time in my ear. I felt a cold, clammy hand brush against my skin, and I recoiled, but there was nowhere to go. The hand was everywhere, on my arms, my face, my chest. I wanted to scream, to fight back, but I couldn't. My body was no longer mine. It felt like the darkness had taken over every part of me, every thought, every breath. The voices in my head became clearer now. They weren't just words. They were memories, flashing before my eyes. I saw the house again, the one where it all began. I saw Evelyn, her smile, wide and unnatural. I saw the frogs, their eyes glowing with that same eerie light. And then I saw the shadow figure, standing at the edge of the pit, watching me. "You're one of us now," it said. "It's time to join the others." I tried to fight it. I tried to pull away from the darkness. But the more I struggled, the tighter its grip became. I felt my body being twisted, reshaped, like clay being molded into something new. And then, as the darkness closed in on me, I felt a strange sense of calm. The croaking faded, the cold lifted, and the shadows began to recede. For a moment, everything was silent. And then I opened my eyes. I wasn't in the pit anymore. I was standing in a dimly lit room, its walls lined with strange, ancient symbols. The air was thick with an oppressive energy. In front of me, a figure stood. It was Evelyn. But she wasn't the same. Her eyes were no longer hollow. They were filled with a sickening light, glowing with the same eerie hue as the frogs. She smiled, her face twisted in a way that made my stomach churn. "Welcome to our world," she said. Her voice was no longer human. It was something darker, deeper. I tried to back away, but I was rooted to the spot. I could feel the weight of the room pressing in on me. I could feel it in my bones. The frogs, no, the creatures, were everywhere. They were watching, waiting, their eyes glowing from every corner. And I knew, with a sickening certainty, that this was where I belonged now. This was where they had always intended for me to be. "You will never leave," Evelyn whispered, her smile widening. And I understood. There was no escape. I had become one of them. The darkness had claimed me. I felt the weight of Evelyn's words sink deep into my chest, as if they were carving into my very soul. There was no escape. No way back to the world I once knew. I was a part of this place now, a prisoner in the realm of the frogs, or whatever they truly were. The room around me seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm. It was as if the very walls were breathing, shifting in time with the slow, steady croaking that filled the air. I could feel the vibrations of their voices in my bones, like they were pulling me deeper into their world. Evelyn stepped closer, her smile never wavering. Her eyes, now glowing bright with that same eerie light, bored into mine. "You're one of us now," she repeated, her voice a low, whispering chant. I tried to move, to push away from her, but my legs were like lead. I was frozen, held in place by some invisible force, unable to do anything but watch as she closed the distance between us. Her fingers, cold and clammy, brushed against my skin. The touch was like ice, sending a shiver through me that made my skin crawl. "Join us," she whispered again, and her voice was so soft, so gentle, that it was almost comforting. But there was nothing comforting about it. I could feel her words wrapping around me like a trap, pulling me deeper into this nightmare. Suddenly, the room began to spin. The walls twisted and bent, the air growing thick and oppressive. The croaking grew louder, more frantic, as if something was approaching, something big, something powerful. I wanted to scream, but no sound escaped my throat. My body refused to respond. And then I saw it. A figure stepped into the room from the shadows. It was tall, impossibly tall, its body cloaked in darkness. The figure moved with an unsettling grace, its presence radiating a power so overwhelming that I could barely comprehend it. Its face was obscured, hidden beneath a hood. But I could feel its eyes, those glowing, cold eyes, piercing through me. I could feel it seeing me, knowing me. "You have been chosen," the figure's voice boomed, low and resonant, like the rumble of thunder in the distance. The very air seemed to crackle with energy as the figure raised its hand. I could feel the power in its gesture, and something inside me stirred, something dark and ancient. The croaking reached a crescendo. The frogs, no, the creatures, began to gather, surrounding me, their glowing eyes burning into my flesh. They weren't just watching anymore. They were waiting. "This is your new home," the figure intoned, its voice like the weight of centuries pressing down on me. "You will be one with us. Forever." I tried to resist, but it was pointless. The darkness had already seeped into my mind, into my very being. I could feel it growing within me, twisting my thoughts, changing me. The ground beneath me began to tremble. The shadows stretched long, reaching out for me. I could feel the creatures closing in, their presence suffocating, overwhelming. The croaking became a roar, a deafening crescendo that filled my ears and rattled my bones. And then, everything went still. The figure lowered its hand, and the room fell silent. I could feel the weight of its gaze on me, waiting. I didn't know what it wanted. I didn't know what it expected. But I knew one thing. There was no way out. I had become a part of this place. I had joined the creatures. And now, I was just like them. In that moment, I realized the truth. I wasn't just a prisoner. I was the next in line. The frogs, the creatures, had chosen me. And now, I would serve them, just like all the others before me. There was no escaping the darkness. I was a part of it now, bound to it forever. As the realization settled deep within me, the room around me began to shift. It was no longer just a room. It was something else, something larger, deeper, more vast than I could comprehend. The walls pulsed, alive with some ancient rhythm. The darkness seemed to stretch on forever, an endless void that consumed all light. I could feel it, crawling under my skin, reaching into my thoughts. I wasn't just a prisoner. I was becoming something other, something that didn't belong to the world I once knew. The croaking started again, but this time, it wasn't coming from the creatures around me. It came from within. A deep, guttural sound that rumbled in my chest, like I was becoming one with the creatures. The figure stepped closer, its hood casting a long, shadowed veil across the floor. Its eyes, those cold, glowing eyes, bore into me, as if it could see into the very core of my being. "You will lead them now," the figure said, its voice reverberating like thunder in my mind. "You are ready." I tried to speak, to protest, but no words came out. My mouth was dry, my throat tight. It was as if something had taken away my voice, leaving me to be nothing more than an observer in my own body. The creatures closed in around me, their eyes glowing brighter, more intense. They weren't just watching anymore. They were waiting for something. "We've been waiting for you," Evelyn's voice whispered in my ear, so close I could feel her breath on my skin. Her laughter followed, high-pitched and eerie, sending a shiver down my spine. I tried to turn away, but I couldn't move. It was as if the very air had solidified around me, trapping me in place. I was paralyzed, unable to escape, unable to even look away. And then, with a sudden, sharp pain, I felt it. Something sharp, something cold, pierced my skin, sinking deep into my chest. The shock of it was like fire and ice at once, burning, freezing, all-consuming. The figure in the shadows stepped forward, its hand now outstretched. I couldn't look away from it. I couldn't resist. The darkness seemed to surge forward, swallowing me whole. And then, I felt it, the shift. It was as if my very essence was being pulled from my body, twisted, shaped, and molded into something new. I could feel myself becoming, but I wasn't sure what I was becoming. The croaking was deafening now. The creatures were everywhere, surrounding me, their forms shifting, changing. I could see their eyes, glowing with an unearthly light. And I could feel it in my own eyes as well. The glow was spreading, infecting me. "You are one of us now," the figure said again, its voice like the sound of the earth shifting. "You will lead the others into the world above." My body trembled, and the pain intensified. But there was something else. Something far worse. I could feel them inside me now. The creatures, the frogs, they weren't just in the room anymore. They were inside my mind. In my thoughts. In my soul. I couldn't escape. I couldn't fight. The figure moved closer, its hand resting on my shoulder. It was cold. So cold. But I couldn't pull away. I couldn't do anything but stand there, trapped, as the transformation continued. The creature's eyes, glowing with an unnatural light, filled my vision. I could feel their hunger, their desire, their need. They were waiting for something, waiting for me to lead them. I was the key. The one who would open the door between worlds. And then, suddenly, I understood. The frogs, the creatures, They weren't just trapped in this place. They had always been here, waiting. And now, I would be the one to lead them back to the world above. I felt my body bend and twist, reshaping, reforming. The pain was unbearable, but I couldn't scream. I couldn't even think properly anymore. The darkness had consumed me completely. And I knew, without a doubt, that I would never leave. I could feel the last of my humanity slipping away, fading like a distant memory. My thoughts were no longer my own. They had been replaced by something darker, something ancient. The figure behind me whispered, its voice vibrating through my spine. "It is time." Suddenly, the ground beneath me cracked open, and a blinding light poured from the fissures. I tried to shield my eyes, but the light wasn't just light, it was power. It was burning through the darkness, through me. I felt my body change again, stretching, growing. I wasn't human anymore. I wasn't even sure what I was. But the frogs, they knew. Their eyes were wide, glowing brighter, as if they were aware of the shift happening within me. Their croaking grew louder, almost deafening, but it was no longer the sound of mere frogs. It was a command. A call. The darkness around us pulsed, responding to the signal. The air was thick, heavy, as if the very fabric of the world was bending under the weight of what was coming. And then, with a sudden force, I was lifted off my feet. The floor below me shattered into pieces, and I was propelled forward, flying through the air, weightless. I could hear the voices of the creatures, the frogs, growing louder as I was pulled toward the blinding light. I reached out, instinctively, but I couldn't grasp anything. I was being pulled, sucked into the light, drawn to the pit that had opened before me. And I realized that this wasn't just a pit, it was a gateway. A portal to another world. One where the creatures ruled. The shadowed figure stood at the edge of the portal, its cold, glowing eyes never leaving me. "Go," it commanded, its voice echoing in the darkness. "Bring them back to the world above. You are the key." I felt the last of my human thoughts dissolve. I felt the power of the frogs, the creatures, flooding my mind. They were within me now, controlling me, and yet I was them. There was no turning back. I had been chosen. And now, I would fulfill my purpose. The light around me grew brighter, more intense. The croaking rose to a fever pitch, filling my ears, shaking my very soul. And then, in a single, earth-shattering moment, I was through. The world I knew shattered behind me, leaving nothing but the void. I was no longer in the house. I was no longer anywhere I could recognize. The air was thick with the scent of decay. The ground beneath me was slick with something otherworldly. I looked around, but all I could see was darkness, broken only by the glow of countless eyes. The creatures were everywhere. They were watching, waiting for me. And I realized, with a cold, sinking feeling, that this was the world I was meant to bring them to. This was their domain. And now, it was mine too. The croaking surged around me, and I could feel it deep in my chest. It was their command, their call. And I was their leader now. "Lead them," the figure's voice echoed in my mind, as if it was always there. "Bring the world above to its knees." I felt a surge of power. A wave of strength unlike anything I had ever known. The creatures obeyed, following my every command. The world I had known was gone. The creatures had won. And I had led them here. There was no escape now. I was one of them. And the world above. It was next. The power within me was overwhelming, filling every fiber of my being. It was like an electric current, buzzing under my skin, urging me forward. The creatures, my creatures, moved with me, following my every step, their glowing eyes fixed on me like they were waiting for the signal. I could feel the world above, distant, but still within reach. It was a place I could never return to. I had crossed that threshold. I was no longer a part of that world. The darkness around us seemed to pulse, as if the entire realm was alive, breathing with anticipation. I stood at the edge of it, the creatures gathered behind me, their forms shifting and flickering in the shadows. I looked up, toward the world I once knew. A world that now seemed so far away, like a distant memory. The air was heavy with the scent of decay and the promise of something darker, something ancient, breaking free. I raised my hand, and the croaking grew silent. The creatures obeyed. For a moment, there was nothing but stillness. Then, I heard the voices again, not just in my head, but from the creatures around me. They were whispering, murmuring in a language older than time itself. It was the language of power, of the earth, of the void. I understood it now. I was no longer just a part of them, I was their leader, their bridge to the world above. The moment I had been waiting for had arrived. The world I had once known would crumble. It would fall under the weight of the creature's hunger. And I would be the one to open the door. But as I stood there, with the creatures at my back and the world above slipping away from me, a thought crossed my mind. Was this what I truly wanted? The thought was fleeting, a whisper of doubt that quickly dissolved under the weight of the power I now commanded. But deep down, buried somewhere, was the faintest trace of the person I used to be, the person who had once dreamed of a normal life, free of monsters and shadows. But that life was gone. It was nothing but a fading echo. I turned my back on the world above and stepped forward. The portal was open, glowing brighter with every step I took. The creatures followed, their croaks rising in unison, and I led them into the darkness. As we crossed into the unknown, I could feel the weight of my new existence settling over me. I had crossed the point of no return, and there would be no coming back. I was now a part of this world, of their world. And as the portal closed behind us, sealing off the world I once knew, I felt a strange peace. There was no longer fear. There was only the call of the creatures, and the power of the darkness that surrounded us. I had become what I had feared most. But in that moment, I realized, perhaps it was never about fear at all. It was about belonging. The croaking grew louder as we ventured further into the unknown. And I knew, without a doubt, that I would lead them until the end of time. And the world above. It was theirs now.